Hey everyone, so this is a quick video on a trip up Mt Stanley, which is part of the Stanley Forest between the town of Stanley and Yakandanda. This particular track we've started off on is Wally's track, and that comes off the road, the Myrtheford Stanley Road, and as you can see it starts off fairly gentle. It's a pretty straightforward track, and this first section, while prone to being soft at times, is generally pretty easy to drive. You do get the odd rut and soft spot, occasional bog hole, as you can see we're driving past just now, but generally it's pretty drivable. And from here though, it does start to climb fairly steeply, and again, like a lot of the tracks, it was fairly clear. I've driven this several times and the conditions varied markedly, but like a lot of tracks, it's clearly been graded fairly recently, and we also haven't had a lot of rain, so even this first section here can be quite a bit more interesting. You can see there it's got a bit of erosion and some ruts. It really doesn't take much to soften the clay up and make this quite a bit more challenging, and this climb really just keeps going and going. It is not super steep, but long and steady, just sort of keeps working its way up the ridge. As you can see today, no particular difficulty, plenty of traction, nice and firm. And what starts out as a fairly much a clay track, sort of gradually merges to become more of a rocky track. Again, it wasn't as rocky. It's certainly a track that I've driven in the past, and you want to make sure you've got your tyre pressures down at least a little bit to make sure you're not going to get a puncture, but that certainly wasn't a concern this particular trip. Once you work your way up this spur on the end of the range, you've got a short drive sort of along a nice little ridge track before working your way down the other side. So Wally's track actually runs from the Myrtheford Stanley Road through to the Granite Track, which is really pretty much a two-wheel drive road. That's an alternate access up to the top of Mt Stanley. And once we reach Granite Track, from there we take the Stanley Jeep Track, which again today, as you'll see when we get there, was fairly steady, easy going, but it's certainly a track that in wet conditions can be more than challenging enough. So here we are, having sort of finished the bulk of the climb for this track, and just working our way onto the ridge line that we follow along for a few minutes. Obviously the video's been edited to cut down the time. The total time from the bitumen down the bottom right through to the top of Mt Stanley was probably a good 30 minutes or so. You do get some opportunities as you work your way along this ridge, even though it is fairly well treed, for some nice views out across the valleys. Having finished the ridge line and just starting to work our way down the other side. given how close this is to both Stanley, Yakandanda and Beechworth for that matter, it's a great little track. Head out for a day trip, much as we did. You can see here it's flattened out nicely just as we're coming to the end of Wally's track, and that was the Granite Track road there, where I just waited for Mark and Jared to catch up before we progressed on a little further. So we've just started off on the Stanley Jeep Track here, continuing up to the top of Mt Stanley. This track starts off sort of sandy and very quickly turns very much a clay track. So look, today it was no issue, but it only takes a little bit of rain to really soften this thing up and it becomes very slippery. You can see there on the left of the track in particular, the rut's sort of worn out, probably by tyre tracks and water running down. And I've certainly had instances where I've had a go at getting up this track and not succeeded, and it's pretty well known locally for recoveries, particularly during winter when people find they're bitten off a little bit more than they can chew. As you can see, this section here up to this washout is decently rutted even now, having been graded recently. So this is just some external footage of that same little section climbing up over. And then here comes Mark in his Prado. Again, making fairly short work of the track today. From that initial section, it works its way up towards the summit, and there's a few sections like this that have again got evidence of getting pretty soft when it's been wet and raining, but when it's dry it's very hard packed and plenty of traction and pretty easy to drive. This track actually you'll see when we get to the top, it empties out onto the car park at the top of Mt Stanley, which is easily accessible in a two-wheel drive vehicle via a gravel road. And the way in which this track empties out onto the car park, it looks like at the top it's just another road down, and more than once I have seen two-wheel drive vehicles try and make their way down this track and get stuck. In fact, where this section of video just started, I've seen a Mazda 3 stuck on that section of track. They can't get back up and they can't get back down. There is some signage right at the top, but it's a little inconspicuous. It just says dry weather road only, four-wheel drive only, I think. Something a little more obvious, discouraging two-wheel drive vehicles would probably be appropriate. You can see here we're just approaching the top of Mt Stanley now, and this section is quite a gentle section of the track, and you can see why people in their two-wheel drive vehicles that come onto this from the top think, yeah, there's no reason they wouldn't drive their car down this road, because it does look like a road from the start here. As you can see, it sort of opens out onto this car park and vehicle turning area, and it really doesn't look like you shouldn't go down there unless you're in a four-wheel drive. So there's the transmission tower and there's a picnic table. It's a nice spot for a quick break before pushing on, and there's plenty of other tracks to explore in the Stanley Forest as well. So thanks for watching and hope you enjoyed.